guys, thanks for visiting my channel. Today I am canning up chili beans. I used my last jar of chili beans earlier this week to make a pot of chili, so I thought I'd bring you along today and show you how I can mine. And in light of full disclosure, I'm trying something a little different today. As I was making my chili this week, I realized that I add several different kinds of beans. It's kind of my go-to, but usually when I can up my chili beans, I just season one type of bean, usually the dark red kidney beans, or I use cranberry beans. Those make delicious chili beans. But anyway, when I make my chili soup, I usually put in a can of black beans and a can of pinto beans also. So I thought what I would do today is try to can them up with the spices in all three beans. So what I have here is dark red kidney beans, about 2.5 pounds of dark red kidney beans, pinto beans, and also black beans, a pound each of the pinto and the kidney. And I let them, I washed them and rinsed them, sorted them, and then I let them soak overnight. And actually they've been soaking closer to 20 hours. The longer you soak your beans, the easier they are to digest. I know I've read articles where people have soaked them for several days because it makes them easier to digest. So I've only soaked mine for about 20 hours now. I usually start them the night before, and then whenever I get a chance to do my canning the next day is how long they go. So this morning when I got up, I did change the water, put fresh water on them, and let them soak longer. So anyway, what we're going to do is I'm going to can in quart jars, because that's about how many beans I use when I make a pot of chili. You can also do this in pints. Quarts will be processed in a pressure canner. You have to pressure can these. Any type of food that's a low acid food has to be pressure canned, and beans certainly are a low acid food. So we're going to pressure can them, quart jars, 90 minutes. If you're doing pint jars, it's 75. My jars and my lids, modern canning guidelines say that if you're going to can for longer than 10 minutes, you do not need to pre-sterilize anything. Just make sure I wash them in hot soapy water and give them a really good rinse. And I'm keeping the jars hot in my sink of really hot water. Some people use their dishwasher, however you want to do it is totally fine. But we're going to add some beans to our jar and then some delicious spices to make them really yummy. So let's get started. Also, I did want to say that I do have my pressure canner. I have about 2 to 3 inches of simmering water in my pressure canner. So we're gonna grab a couple jars here. I always, when I can, if you've watched my other videos, you know I do 2 jars at a time. However you want to do it is fine. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add about 2.5 cups of beans. You want your jar about 2/3 full. That's about, maybe a few more. Your beans in there, and then we're going to add some delicious spices. Now I add 2 tablespoons of chili powder, and I like the dark red chili powder. I also wanted to mention that when you're doing your beans, all I did was soak mine. Most canning books will tell you to cook them for 30 minutes before you can them up. I like for my beans to have a little more texture to them, to be not so soft. So all I did was soak mine. I know people do it different ways, so it's entirely up to you. If you like really soft beans, then go ahead and cook them for the 30 minutes and then do this process. I'm just using soaked and rinsed beans. Okay, so 2 tablespoons of chili powder, and then we're going to do a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of cumin, and a teaspoon of paprika. And I just realized that I forgot my salt, so let me grab some salt. Salting is entirely up to you. Some people like to salt their beans, some people don't, so you can do this without salting them. I like to add some salt to mine, so I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt because I'm doing quarts. If you're doing pints, you'll want a half of a teaspoon. And then we're going to fill the jar. Then we're going to add some veggies, and this is optional as well. I add red pepper, green pepper, and jalapeno. You can use serrano, you can use whatever kind of peppers you like, and kind of go according to your heat level that you want. You can also add fresh onion here, but I always chop a fresh onion and fresh garlic when I make my chili. So I'm just going to use the peppers for flavor. The red bell peppers, I'm going to add, I don't know, 3 or 4, probably 4, 5, I guess I have 5 in there, chunks. I kind of chunked them. And then my green pepper, these are ones that were in our garden last year, and we just had an abundance of them, so I froze them. So I'm using my frozen green peppers from our garden from last year. I just defrosted them, and I'm going to put a few of those in there also. Get my red peppers in there. So just however much you think you want in your beans is fine. We're just trying to add some extra seasoning here. And then my jalapenos in my garden were super hot, so I'm just going to put like a half a teaspoon or so in each jar. I don't want my chili beans to be really, really hot. And those were frozen as well. I just, at the end of the season when we had an abundance of them, we couldn't eat them up fast enough, so I just chopped them and put them in a freezer bag and kept them in my freezer. So go ahead, you add your beans, your seasonings, and then your peppers and onion if you choose. And then we're going to fill the jar with water. I had this water simmering on the stove, and I always use filtered water whenever I'm canning. And we want a 1-inch headspace. And 1-inch headspace is about to the bottom rim of your jar. I need more counter space, it looks like. Got a lot going on over here. All right, that's good. And then we're going to debubble, and I have a debubbling tool. Debubbling is important. You want to release any bubbles that have gotten trapped at the bottom of your jar, so just run your tool around the edge of the jar. I kind of wiggle it around the bottom as well. If air bubbles get trapped in your jars while they're canning, it can interfere with the seal, so it's important to do the debubbling. If you don't have a debubbling tool, no worries, just use a butter knife. That's pretty good. And then we're going to take our lids and center them. And then our rings, we're going to make fingertip tight. And put them in our canner. Do 2 more. Now, you've heard me talk, if you watched any of my other videos on canning, you've heard me talk about this. I always add a couple of tablespoons of white vinegar to my canning water. That way it keeps your jars nice and pretty, and it prevents mineral deposits from collecting on your jars. So I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of my white vinegar. And then we're going to crank the heat, and I'm going to put my lid on. I'm using an all-American canner, so we need to line up the arrow with the little notch here on the front, and then you want to try to make sure your lid is fairly even all the way around. And then you want to seal it with your thumb screws, and you do 2 at a time, opposites of each other. Those nice and tight. And then I've cranked my heat up to as high as it'll go, and we're going to watch for steam to come out of our vent. We're going to vent it for 10 minutes, and then we'll add our weight, and I will bring you back. Okay guys, we have steam coming out of our vent. We're going to allow the steam to vent for 10 minutes according to my canner's directions, so make sure you follow the instructions for whatever canner you're using. We're going to vent for 10 minutes, and then we're going to add the weight and bring it up to temperature and then start timing. So I will bring you back. I did want to mention that my canner holds 7 quarts, and with the number of beans I have enough beans left to do about 3 more quarts. So the recipe that I've given you will do about 10 quarts of chili beans. So if you can adjust the recipe accordingly if you don't want to make that many beans, or if your canner won't hold that many. I'll just do another canning session once this is done and finish those up. So anyway, 10 quarts for this recipe. I'll bring you back. Our 10 minutes of venting time is up. So now I'm going to add my weight for 10 pounds of pressure. Forgive the background noise. My husband is doing work on our basement. Anyway, I'm going to add my weight for 10 pounds of pressure. That's appropriate for my altitude. Check your altitude so you know what PSI is appropriate for where you live. And we're going to add our weight. We're going to bring it up to temperature. It's going to be 240 degrees, which is 10 to 11 pounds of pressure for me. And then when it starts rocking and rolling, I'll bring you back and we'll start timing. Okay, we are up to pressure and our weight is rocking and rolling. So now we're going to start timing. So I'm going to set my timer for 90 minutes. If you are doing pints, you want 75 minutes. And we want our weight to shake, rock, whatever you want to call it, 1 to 3 times a minute. So I always adjust my heat to a medium for me, but I always listen for it. You'll have to adjust your heat according to your stove so that it will shake or rock 1 to 3 times a minute. So we are going to finish our time here, and then I'll bring you back and we'll finish things up. I messed up here. I apologize. I was dealing with a sick puppy when I was making this video, and I failed to turn my mic back on for this clip. Anyway, I was just explaining that once my time was up, the 90 minutes was up, I turned my heat off and allowed my canner to return to 0 pressure. Then I removed my weight and waited a few minutes and then removed the lid, and then I let my jars sit in my canner to cool slightly for about 10 minutes. And that's, if you've watched any of my other canning videos, that's what I always do. That's per the canning instructions for my All-American canner. So make sure you follow whatever instructions you have for the canner that you are using. But anyway, I ended up with 7 beautiful quarts of delicious chili beans. And then I went back and did another canning session and canned up 6 more pints of chili beans. And so I ended up with quite a few chili beans with this recipe. But I hope you enjoyed coming along with me for this recipe, and I hope you'll give it a try. There's nothing like home canning. It's so great to put your own food in a jar and preserve it for a later date. And these chili beans are just
really good, and I hope you'll give the recipe a try. If you have any questions about the recipe or questions about canning, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will be happy to get back to you as soon as possible. Anyway, thanks for watching my videos and coming along with me today, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.